Hello, everyone. I am Deb Scher, Artistic Director of Avaloch Farm Music Institute, and I am absolutely delighted to welcome you to Made at Avaloch, our new series created to celebrate the variety and excellence of the work Avaloch has supported. Each event will highlight one or two projects and will include discussions with musicians about process, as well as recorded performances of completed work. So far, Avaloch has hosted over 1,000 musicians in hundreds of groups and including dozens of composers. We hope you enjoy the diversity and depth of the genre and approaches to the creative process which will be presented here. Before we begin, however, I would like to thank a few people. First, our administrative team, Mason Donovan and Jenna Hall. Second, our musical team, Hannah Collins, Mike Compitello, Katherine Dowling, who joined me in creating these events. And last but certainly not least, Fred Tauber, without whose generosity the vision and inspiration of Avaloch would never have come to be. So thank you for joining us for this ongoing celebration of creative work made at Avaloch.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I am so honored and privileged to be here speaking with Sunspeak, an ensemble who have been at Avaloch many, many times. In fact, that's the last time I saw all of you. So I invite you to introduce yourselves and to share a little bit about your ensemble.
Yeah, I'm Matt up here. I mostly play guitar and these days some bass in Sunspeak. Below me is Nate, who's the drummer in the band. And to my diagonal left, I guess, is Dan, who is a brilliant recording engineer and in more recent years has been playing keyboards and synthesizers with us. And yeah, we've been working in Chicago for many years, and now at this point we kind of seem to live in 3 different places, but Avaloch Farm has kind of been the one time of the year that we are able to set aside everything else and dive into this particular music and this configuration and make some stuff happen.
Wonderful. So let's get started with the music. I know everyone's excited to hear. So would you like to share a little bit about the first segment of music that we're going to hear?
Sure. So this is a song from a record we did a few years ago with the great singer Sarah Serpa, who we were able to bring her up to Avaloch to like rehearse, collaborate, co-write some of this music. She lives in New York. We were both in Chicago at the time, so this was a nice place to kind of come together and collaborate. So this is a song featuring her. Dan recorded this actually in a studio in Chicago. And this is a composition which I guess kind of everyone had some input in. You know, there was like a kind of maybe started with a kind of improvised like rhythm type figure and then some harmony, and then she worked on like a melody line over top, which we were kind of amazed by when it happened, because it was, you know, it's she managed to make something that could be clunky feel really graceful. And then actually tacked onto the end of this piece is a little outro recorded much later in Chicago, which actually, as it happens, is the first time I played the drums after a pretty big elbow surgery. So this one's always been a special one for me, just as like a keepsake or a memory of getting back to playing music.
All right, let's have a listen. that was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I just wanted to point out to everyone listening that I had mentioned before, you've been to Avaloch many times, but what's extra special is that you were in fact the first ever musicians at Avaloch, which makes you, I think, really extra special in the Avaloch family. So I'd love now to invite you to share a bit more about your experiences there over the years and how they've impacted and how they've contributed to your life as an ensemble.
Well, I definitely want to let Dan get in there, but since it was just Nate and I for the first few years, I'll at least speak to that.
I'll have plenty to say, don't worry.
I'm sure you will. I know you. Man, I mean, the first year in 2013, Avaloch Farm was like the extent of my post-undergraduate plan. I knew I had 3 weeks to like go to this place and make some music, and beyond that, I really had no idea what I was trying to do or where I was trying to live or anything like that. So driving out there with Nate was just this like giant question mark of how we were going to spend our time there and where we might go after that. And even if we would continue collaborating on something, or if this band would kind of continue to have a life beyond that fall. So yeah, that first year we were there for 3 weeks, which is the longest time we've ever been there. But wow, what a beautiful thing to be there for 3 weeks. And we ended up just writing a ton of music together and tapping into just like the magic of having that much time to just work on one thing, you know? And I think as our approach to the time and our process around using the residency has evolved and shifted over the years, that remains to be like the constant every year, is like, what can really come from having that kind of time at your disposal to just set aside everything else and collaborate with the people you're with.
Yeah, that first year, we didn't plan to necessarily even write any music at all, but we ended up writing and recording our first record there. We didn't have any, like, we hadn't researched studios. We didn't know it, you know, we just kind of like, well, let's see what happens. And then a week and a half in, we're like, wait a minute, we could probably just make a record right now, right? Should we make a record? Sure, you know? So it's that kind of like open-ended space often lets you surprise yourself with what happens, you know? Like you, where ordinarily something would either get frustrating or hard or boring, or you'd be busy or whatever, and you just stop doing it. You just go, well, I guess I'll just wake up tomorrow and try again. And then you just do that for enough days in a row, and all of a sudden a lot of music comes out of it, you know? So, and everything else is easy, right? You're so taken care of that it really facilitates you just not having to worry about anything else, which is important too.
Yeah, and I guess I would probably have to, like, for me to speak about this, kind of segue into how I got to know Matt and Nate, and then eventually came to Avaloch in 2016 with these guys. And I guess I'll say that it's kind of interesting. There's always these music circles and friend circles and people that, you know, play together. And so I heard about Matt and Nate and their project, and I knew that they're maybe coming to Chicago, but they were going to be away after the summer that they graduated, and there was this whole thing. And it was kind of funny because from my perspective, I had already lived in Chicago for a year before they came to Chicago. And like, I just had been hearing on the radar, oh, these guys are awesome and they're going to be coming. And like, when they moved, like, it's kind of like a fresh, crazy ensemble to get to hear all the time. And I would hear about this place called Avaloch, which seemed like this faraway, magical music land where everybody was really inspired and came up with a bunch of awesome stuff all the time and heard a lot of things. So when they came back from Avaloch and said, okay, well, for this next thing, we're going to be working with Sarah Serpa, and maybe we could make a record, but we're going to go workshop everything, you know, at Avaloch, and we're going to bring it to you. I didn't know what to expect. I had no idea what I was going to be getting in the studio. And when that record came together and the way it came together kind of was like the start of some of my my ideas about engineering and producing and getting into the future of what I wanted to be getting into at that time. And the process of making that record was so cool because we did book studio time, but then Nate was saying he had this amazing experience where he had the surgery, and then I got to capture him playing the drums for the first time at the end of that Basin track where he opens up, and that was recorded in a different space. And so I remember that was kind of the idea where I started realizing, well, all this stuff that I do, maybe it doesn't just always have to be in a studio, maybe it can be in different places. And so when I ended up going in 2016 with them, I decided that Avaloch was going to be this experimental zone for what a recording studio could be or not be, given just a space and resources and really awesome energy and like a beautiful area, and a band that had like a really, really solid sound that could be malleable and go lots of places. So that when I arrived at Avaloch, I put a recording studio in my car and I drove 16 hours from Chicago, and I showed up at some hour of the evening and I was like, I have no idea what I'm getting myself into, but there was food and my friends and all of you all, and it was an amazing start to that. So we can talk more about that, but that was kind of how I came to work with these guys and know Avaloch.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to like this evolving process of how our time there has kind of shifted in its direction. Like the first year that Dan got involved, we basically wrote a bunch of music with Sarah, brought her to Chicago, you know, had like 2 days to cut this record, and that was it. And the next year we brought Dan's studio to the farm, and just for the first year, you know, tried to see what would happen if we could make a whole record in that room, but came to the situation with the whole record already written. So it was a matter of kind of laying it down. And the last 3 years have been kind of testing this idea of what happens if we come with no plan whatsoever, but know that we're going to have this period of time in this space. We know that it sounds cool in there. If we just bring all our stuff, can we capture the sort of improvised spark of an idea, but also through having that much time in a space, be able to turn that into a more compositional mindset and actually make records from like all the way from nothing to finished in that space.
Yeah,
That is so, sorry, please.
Oh, no. I would say that these last couple of years have been, in a way, like have informed the way that I think about recording or playing or whatever the most, just because there's, you know, we all came from sort of a jazz and improvised music background, and then this band was more interested in kind of written songs, even if the process of generating the ideas might still be improvising. But there was always, you know, we would take all these recordings on our phone of like, oh, and this is the idea, and we'll write like something like this and whatever, right? And it was always good and it was cool, but it was never quite like what the like terrible sounding phone recording.
Do you mean like the recreating?
Yeah, recreating, exactly. Mm-hmm. So you just like, there's some energy, something there in the room the very first time something happens that is only there the first time it happens. And so like being able to have a week of just totally open-ended studio time in the middle of the woods gives you so much space to like let those ideas just come out and then be captured kind of as they should be captured, and then they just exist, and then you can later you can manipulate or edit or, you know, do whatever, any of a million things to kind of shape it more into something coherent and like a song, right? So like this next track that we're going to play is very much an example of just like a moment that got captured that isn't really possible to recreate, but is a really interesting piece of music, you know. And then later we did some stuff to it to make it kind of have more of a whole, right? I
think so. Although if my memory serves me right, it's just one splice, right? So it's kind of just two long improvisations put together. So it does capture a lot of that live kind of in the moment energy. Yeah, I think. And I will say, like the back half of this piece, the quieter section, kind of goes for a while, maybe longer than we would otherwise let ourselves like live in that zone. And there's something about being at Avaloch Farm, having that kind of time, not watching the clock at all, that allows for just a more like immersive improvisational spirit, I think. Just really letting things run their course, letting things take their time and saying, no, it's okay. Like this can be like 6 minutes of just this floating thing, you know? I think in earlier records, we might have been like, okay, 45 seconds to that and on to the next idea.
Mhm.
But yeah.
All right, let's listen. Wow, another wonderful recording. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'd love to hear a bit more about your process of creating, because it sounds really collaborative, not only between Matt and Nate, but also with Dan being involved. And it sounds also like Avaloch has been a really big part of that process. So I invite you now, if you'd like, just to share a bit more about that.
Well, yeah, I can start off and say a little something about just the general creative process that I'm involved in with making records with various bands, and how it's been different working with Sunspeak at Avaloch, and maybe primarily because, let's say you do get a block out of a bunch of days, or like a headspace that you're gonna be able to carve out for a week to make somebody's music, and you do end up making it in a city, and you're working and you're immersive in that, you're still in that bubble, and that can be really great for the music, but also at the same time you can stay in that space. And what I really enjoyed about coming to Avaloch was that I approached working with Matt and Nate at the space as almost an experiment for me with my equipment and to get everything right. But then also at the same time, I knew that if things were going well and we were able to capture what we were able to capture, you could get really, really kind of obsessively down what I like to call, some people like chasing the dragon, where you hear like a part of the song and you're like, okay, we can do this for 20 minutes and try to get this exactly right. And so sometimes I find that you can get in those spaces, and then if you go to dinner or something, and let's say you're in a city and you're still with the people, you might still hold that kind of space, and maybe the creativity for the day might be done. But what I really enjoyed about this process that's kind of unraveled working at Avaloch is that we might work on something during the day and hit all these different spaces, but then the dinner part of Avaloch is where we get to see all these incredible musicians from all over the world that are in their worlds and like making all these incredible things and from all over the world. So I would get excited to be like, okay, this is the end of the day, but there's more inspiration because I'm going to sit and have a conversation with somebody who's going to blow my mind, and then I'll maybe get to hear them play, and then have a tea, and then maybe, and usually we would feel inspired to go back and be like, what was that one thing that we were hacking away at like 3 o'clock that we gave up on? Like, oh, and there might be like a different way of hearing that or seeing that. And I know these guys can fill in after this, but there were a few times where I even remember we heard a fellow musician and we're like, wow, it would be really great if they would play on this or maybe give their input. And there are a few things, you know, like where the collaboration opened up into that. And that was really kind of special and cool for me, you know.
Yeah, it's a funny thing at Avaloch how private the whole thing is, and that we're all just like immersed in our work, and yet how much of a community there really is around the people that are there from week to week. And yeah, like Dan said, just getting to hear what everyone is working on and having such a wide spectrum of ideas there. I remember when I first applied to Avaloch Farm, the first year it was getting started, and I contacted Deb, and I was like, this kind of seems like a chamber music residency, classical music residency, but I have this group, it's just electric guitar and drum set. Are you into that? And she totally like rolled the dice and took a chance on us and made sure we were in a place that was really far away from everyone else's rehearsal space so that it wouldn't be too loud. But yeah, just having such an open heart to experimentation and people working on original music, and having, being able to see that open up over the years, and just how wide of a breadth there is of artistic endeavors happening at Avaloch Farm was super inspiring for us. So we would find people that we were just like, oh my God, making such a beautiful sound. I wonder if they'd want to like come hang out and, you know, come down to the shed and just, you know, keep the microphones open and see what happens. And the next piece that we're gonna get into is one where I think it captures a little bit of every part of our process, in that it began as an improvisation. We edited it into a form. I think I composed a melody on top of it, and then we brought in singer Yoon Sun Choi, who was there that week, to then sight read my melody on top, and then we kind of like messed with her vocal take, and it was just this cyclical thing of improvising and editing and composing and reshaping and kind of turning it into what it is.
Specifically, I'd like to butt in. I'd like to say, I just remember that's kind of like what I was alluding to vaguely, but I just remember that being like a very quick process. And like a lot of times, like if you are working in a studio, like a lot of times you might do that and you might go back and forth with the email with all the revisions and somebody compose a thing, and that's wonderful. But what I remember specifically with Matt and Nate was both like every part that was in that thing was a challenge, and I think it was sort of started at like 2 or 3 p.m. that day, and then we like had a backbone of a song together, and then Matt improvised the melody and then transcribed it on a deadline to get to dinner on time, and then showed Yoon, be like, hey, would you maybe want to sing this? She's like, what do you want? And he pulled out the manuscript, and then we did that right after dinner, and we had this thing that was almost like inconceivable, or would have taken a long time. We were able to do that because of how focused that spot was. And I remember that being like really special for me as in like the engineering role, where we were pulling that together. It's like, oh, this is kind of special and cool that these guys are into just like doing this stuff on the fly. And that's how some of those things came together. That was really special to be able to do that there.
I think there's something to like not really having a chance to overthink things a little bit.
Yeah.
Staying in that zone, just like keep throwing paint at the wall, keep, you know, making revisions and moving forward, and never really stepping out and back to, you know, your regular life or something where it kind of takes you out of the zone. So staying in the zone is like, that's the key.
thank you so much for sharing that musical selection. I understand that work will be on an upcoming album that is going to be released into the world soon, which is super exciting. So I invite you now to share more about that project and about that album, if you'd like.
Sure. So this album we recorded in 2017 at Avaloch. That's, it was just the three of us. Dan recorded the whole thing. We went back to Chicago. Dan mixed and mastered. So it's, I think, 12 or so tracks, mostly generated through that same process. Like, we didn't come to Avaloch with a bunch of material written. We came to Avaloch kind of with a blank slate, improvised a bunch, wrote some, edited, overdubbed, turned what we had into a kind of a coherent statement. And I think we originally had something like 30 tracks worth of material to choose from. And so a lot of the process of making the record was just being very careful and selective about, okay, what happens now and what happens when, and do we really like this enough, or is it just kind of cool? And then so we really kind of found our favorite moments and made them into kind of one coherent whole. So things are still a little uncertain in this uncertain time about, we don't have a specific date for release, but you can certainly follow us here on Facebook, and we will keep you updated.
Wonderful. We'll certainly link in the comments on this video as well.
Great.
So we can keep apprised of your upcoming projects. Thank you so much, Sunspeak, for being with us as part of this Made at Avaloch series. It's so interesting and wonderful, I think, for everyone hearing about how Made at Avaloch is really very literal with your experiences there. The pieces are made at Avaloch, the albums are made at Avaloch, and it's really beautiful. So thank you again so much for your time. I hope to see you there in person before too long. We can have a delicious lunch together.
Yeah.
Like old times.
Yeah.
I really hope so.
Yeah, please.
Will happen.
Yeah. Okay, take care. Be well.
Take care, you guys. So good to see you. Bye-bye.
All right.
Hello, welcome. I am so happy and privileged to be speaking with Echo, the wonderful ensemble, who I have had the privilege of being at Avaloch with several times now. So I invite you to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your ensemble.
So yeah, I guess I can go first. My name is Evan Levine. I play bass and also write some of the songs with Echoes. I'm currently based in Chicago, Illinois, and just have had a really great time at Avaloch, just writing music and really creating something unique with this ensemble, which otherwise we wouldn't have opportunities to do.
Yeah, my name is Max Bessesen. I'm a saxophone and woodwind player with Echoes, and I'm also based in Chicago, Illinois. And similar to Evan, I found the opportunity to compose and practice music with this band to be unlike any other because of the facilities that Avaloch provides. So we're really grateful for that opportunity.
I'm
Cool.
Chase.
Oh.
I live in New York, and echoing what they said, I'm missing Avaloch a lot right now. So thank you, Katherine, for having us and allowing us to create this virtual community here. Also, I'll just add that it's nice that we're sharing this online event with Sunspeak, because we actually heard about the residency through them, and our first introduction to the place was through them. So we're happy to be sharing this time with them as well.
Cool. My name's Matt DiBiase. I'm primarily a mallet percussionist, but I also play keyboards and do a lot of like music production and sound design stuff. And I'm based in San Diego. And yeah, Avaloch, I mean, what's not to love about Avaloch? But I think we're all missing it dearly in our hearts right now, wishing we were there. But yeah, I think like so much of the journey of this band is attributable to that place, and so much of the inspiration too for our ensemble just gets so well nourished there, because it's not like every ensemble is a jazz quartet doing like electronic music or anything like that, or integrating it. There's so many different perspectives that we get while we're there on what a performance can be, what it's meant to be, and how to think about it. And that really challenges us to do new things within the realm that we're comfortable in. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So why don't we get started with some music? I know we have a few pieces that we're going to be experiencing together. So up first, I think is called Glimpse. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. So that's a song from our first EP as a band, Square Two, which we wanted to share just because it was our first time at Avaloch as a group, where I brought in the main idea for the piece, but I think it really came to life collectively throughout the course of the residency. And also we filmed and recorded it while in the residency at the High Noon studio. And that was kind of our first foray into collective music making, and then also self-recording and self-filming. And I think, some of our some aspects of our approach in those areas have changed over the past few years, which you'll see as we go through each piece. But I think this is a good introduction to where we were at the time. I don't know if anyone else wants to say something.
No, I mean, I think you covered it, Chase.
Awesome. Well, let's have a listen. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that performance with us. I'm super interested to hear more about the piece and about the creative process behind it. So I invite you now to share about that.
Cool. Yeah, so this was a piece that we wrote kind of all together. And I think our first time at Avaloch, compositionally speaking, we discovered that we worked best having people bring in like full-fledged compositions, and then we would sort of arrange it bit by bit as a group, or experiment with a few higher level ideas of how we were going to organize everything and orchestrate it. But this was an idea, Glimpse was an idea originally brought in by Chase, where we hadn't fleshed out everything, and he decided to bring it in with that intent of us maybe adding things to it collectively. And it was an example of sort of the first time we went through with an idea of like, this is good, we want to share this, when we all sort of like just pitched in equally with different elements of the song. So that was a cool little hump that we got over there.
Some fun like specifics in the song that each member contributed, or if I remember correctly, Chase played this sort of, dare I say, dense groove with like the hi-hat and snare that we all kind of heard it. We're like, oh, this sounds good. And then I remember Matt trying out a few different sounds on his synth, and he kind of found one that felt like it really worked really naturally with Chase's drum groove. And then Evan and I were kind of improvising along with that, but we were looking for a way to kind of start the piece. And I think one of the things that kind of helped get the song into a place that was more finalized was when we arrived at this call that began at the beginning, which is based on some things that I had learned in India just before coming to Avaloch. And so that was a fun way that all of our different creative processes kind of intermingled on this particular song.
That is so interesting. I know everyone's like intrigued by this idea of collective writing because we've also heard that you're living in different places. So I'd love to hear more about that process and about how your residencies at Avaloch have informed or maybe contributed to your writing process.
I think the ability, oh, you go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, all of us were, at one point we were all living together when we were in college together at Oberlin Conservatory, but oftentimes, like when students graduate from a university and they all sort of disperse into different parts of the country, that those connections sort of fade away. And what Avaloch has been able to do is like really be able to bring us together, and to be able to write collectively is a really unique opportunity that we were able to have. And it doesn't always work out perfectly just because like everybody comes from such different places to create something that's really cohesive. But with this piece in particular, I feel like we were able to get to something really cool, and is part of the reason, you know, why this band works together so well. Because when we recorded this album was my first time like officially joining Echoes, and it was really just a awesome experience, and I'm really glad to, you know, continue to make music with these guys today.
Yeah, I think the ability to rehearse without the constraint of having a live performance or a deadline of some sort can be very helpful. Actually, like for this piece, I think I'm remembering, I actually wrote an extended bass line intro or something that we ended up ditching, but that's the type of decision that just emerges from continued rehearsal over time and trial and error and figuring out what works and what doesn't. And the affordance of that type of time to really flesh out different ideas is often non-existent in the outside world. So I think just having the ability to continually experiment and kind of, you know, throw paint at the wall and see what sticks is something we're really grateful for, and something you just don't find outside of that extended residency setting.
One of the things I think that's also really special about this group is that we have a really long working relationship. Like Evan mentioned, we started playing together when we were in school, which is like 6 years ago now. And the fact that we've worked together for this long means we know each other very well personally and have a lot of trust. Like I think we talk a lot about the rehearsal space being a safe space for like bringing ideas, but also for like saying that ideas don't work, even if they're not your own, you know, like working together and being comfortable enough and trusting one another enough that we can come up with something good through trial and error.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I know we're probably now wanting to hear some more music. So up next we have, I'd love to hear a little bit more about this next piece, and then we'll have a listen.
This is Give. Do you want to talk about it, Max?
Sure. Yeah. So the concept of give comes a lot from the title and the many ways that you can interpret the word give. To start with, I find this idea of giving to be a really beautiful thing in our lives. This idea that giving isn't just the process of transferring something from one person to another or one place to another, but it's this process of relinquishing oneself, like a bridge gives. And in this song, I tried to kind of combine these ideas of like searching and being less receptive to the idea of giving and being generous in that way, but then to kind of culminate in this celebration that it feels really good to give, and that through giving and giving yourself up, you can maybe become greater by becoming part of something larger.
How perfect for ensemble playing, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Great. So let's listen to Give. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that performance with us. I know that that piece, Give, is on an album, and which of course we'll link to in the comments. I'd love to hear more about that album if you'd like to share.
Yeah, so that's from an album called Loading Screen that we released on Outside in Music in summer 2019, I believe. Yeah, August 2019. And all of the songs from that album were conceived and initially rehearsed during our residency at Avaloch. But unlike our first album and our forthcoming album, the process for recording that music was a little bit different. We workshopped all the pieces in Avaloch and performed them for the musicians there. But then we did a few performances after our residency and then ended up in New Jersey and recorded it over 2 days at Lake House Recording Studio in Asbury Park. And I think also just one thing we haven't talked about is the ability to not only workshop pieces at Avaloch, but have the initial performances be in front of a peer group of musicians we really admire has also kind of been indispensably important for our process, both to hear different musics in that setting and take the influences from those people into our own work, but also, I say pressure not in any negative way, but the knowledge that you're going to present this work that you've developed over the period of time and need to present it to these people who can really throw down, and so if they'll know if it's not going to be good. So I think having our initial performances for all of this music be in that setting has improved our work drastically, and I'm sure other people would echo that.
No pun intended.
Yeah, who hopes to lead that?
Well, one thing, I guess, just to sort of like mark where we are in the journey, I guess, like the first album, I don't know if we've said it yet, but it was really all tracked. I brought up a bunch of recording equipment and Evan brought some stuff too. And I had these interfaces and we just set it up in our shed. I think it was in High Noon. Did we record that album in High Noon?
Oh, for Square 2? Yeah.
Yeah. And so we set up all this recording equipment there and we found some other stuff on campus to help us record and did everything there and then did a lot of the post-production afterwards. And then on this second phase with Loading Screen, we had, as Chase said, had the experience of performing the music more publicly, even on and off of Avaloch's campus before going to the recording studio. And I think we all agreed that we really liked that process in leading up to the recording, like having it manifest in the real world and getting a certain degree of affirmation from that was satisfying and also brought new energy to the recording process. So yeah, we've done like completely DIY and then sort of like completely studio. And then, that's where we are in the journey because the next thing sort of is not either of those things. So
yeah, it's a little combination of the greatest aspects of both. And you'll hear it in a second, but so the next piece from our forthcoming album we brought all of the gear back to the studio and the campus at, this wasn't in High Noon, this last one, was it?
It was, yeah.
It was, okay. Well, back in the same place where we recorded Square 2, but we decided to change the process a little bit, and instead of having like a live performance where we all set up different mics and we track everything together, we tracked all the instruments individually so that we were able to have more control over the sounds like we were in a studio, but we had the time, and we really did spend a lot of time on this last one of just really getting everything to sound perfect in the way that we wanted it, like it was in a studio, but we were able to do it, with the budget of a DIY album.
It's exciting. So of course, the next track that we'll listen to is from this album, but I'd love to hear more about the piece and the album. You said it's forthcoming, so that's something to really look forward to.
Yeah, we're looking forward to putting out Lasting early next summer on Ears and Eyes Records, which is a label here in Chicago. I think Sunspeak actually released an early album of theirs on Ears and Eyes as well. And like Evan said, this album is our most thorough exploration of what we can do in a studio setting compared to a live setting. And to circle back to what we talked about in terms of performing in front of other musicians at Avaloch, I think we also explored the kind of chamber element of our instrumentation more deeply than we had before, in terms of planning out parts and planning out ways that we can interact with one another in a way that's not just a discursive solo. While we love doing that, and we do that a lot live, there's a lot that we were able to accomplish on this that we wouldn't have been able to through that process alone.
Yeah, and then we also have the ability of like one person performing multiple instruments, and like being able to have these layers that otherwise couldn't exist in a live setting, which is really cool. Being able, and I like playing guitar too, which I never really get to do.
Yeah, just to give you a sense of what was going on in the room, what we were really doing it one at a time. And so what would happen is, like, I would be on the drums, Matt would be on the soundboard running the audio, and then one other person might be holding a camera, or two other people might be holding a camera and filming. So kind of the roles were divided, and then also were switched as each of us did our own part. So it was really collaborative, not just compositionally and musically, but also in terms of the film and audio production element of the piece.
Shout outs to Chase too for basically, he went first, set the tone of the
Oh,
album
yeah.
by literally
yeah.
being the base of everything we were going to record onto. You know, no pressure, Chase, just the energy of our album from the get-go.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. Shout out to Chase.
Mm-hmm.
So the next, sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say that Chase really crushed it. So he did a great job.
Yeah,
As
Chase.
I'm sure we will hear. So exciting. So I have memories of hearing this next piece at Avaloch, JamFest, right? And I think I possibly heard more than one iteration of it, if I'm remembering correctly. But we will listen to that in just a minute, but I'd love to hear if you'd like to share a bit more about this piece specifically, and maybe it's some of the inspiration or what it represents to you.
Sure, yeah. So this is something that I wrote. Like I mentioned, this band started when we were in college and perhaps had a little bit more youthful joy in the names that we chose to give to our compositions. And so I wrote a song called JamFest 2015 that was one of the worst songs that I ever wrote in my life. And we performed it in front of the student body. And afterwards I was like, oh, that wasn't very good. Maybe I'll do this something better next time. So then I wrote a song that had a lot of similar devices in 2017, and so I just called it JamFest 2017. And we had a lot of fun playing that in our various live performances for the couple of years after that. So then that led to this next one. So JamFest is just kind of a recurring multiple year type of song that I have contributed to this band.
Correction, sweet. It's a sweet now.
It's just a sweet showcasing growth over the years.
Awesome. Well, let's have a listen. Fantastic. Thank you so much. It brings back so many great memories of listening to you share your music in the High Noon Hut. So I'd love to hear if you'd like to share about maybe some future projects, upcoming projects. I know we've heard about the album release coming up, but the broader Avaloch community, I'm sure, is really, really excited and inspired to follow more of what you have coming up in the coming year.
So during this year, we didn't get to do an Avaloch residency, but we've posted a couple of songs that we've been trying to get together our like remote recording and production capabilities. So if you want to give us a follow on Instagram or Facebook, we're at Music by Echoes. And then, yeah, we have our forthcoming album, Lasting, which will be released in early summer of next year, which will be the culmination of all of the pieces that we recorded last year at Avaloch.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult moment because obviously there's so much uncertainty. We were planning to release this album, actually I believe in November or possibly this month, October this year, and we had a few performances scheduled in Florida and Tennessee and other places that were obviously postponed. So we're hoping, given that the live performance tour is such an important part of the documentation process, we decided to delay it till next year. So we're hoping it will come out in spring or summer, and it would be amazing if live performances can accompany that. But we're not totally sure how things will play out, but that's our provisional plan. I'd also just say, individually, I think a lot of us have been and are doing cool things and have things on the horizon. Max just released an album. I recently released an album, and I think Evan and Matt are about to release their own albums. Or Evan's working on an ambient bass album, and Matt is doing his own solo multimedia production stuff. So perhaps we could provide you links to listen to that stuff too. So in addition to our collective work, we're all doing things on our own and trying to stay busy as best we can.
Really exciting. I look forward to following and consuming all of those various projects. It's super exciting. Well, on behalf of Avaloch, of the broader Avaloch community, thank you so much for not only joining me in conversation right now, but also for involving Avaloch in your creative process. I think through what you've shared with me in this conversation, it's clear that it has been really quite a thread in your creative experiences as an ensemble. So I feel the same way, of course, with my own creative work. So I really, really appreciate you sharing with me this evening.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It was our pleasure to get to talk to you and to talk a little bit more about this music. And as always, thank you so much for the opportunity to be affiliated with the Avaloch community. It's a real privilege for us.
Yeah, and also just a big thanks to Sunspeak, just an amazing crew of musicians. Matt and Nate are dear friends of ours, and we really look forward to hearing what they're doing as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, and stay healthy, stay safe, be well. I look forward to seeing you in person at Avaloch before too long.
Thanks, Katherine.
Thank you.